today is Tuesday, April 29th, 2025, and it is exactly 4 p.m. We want to excuse President Partridge. She is traveling and will not be here, as well as Business Administrator Devin Daly. They will not be with us today. We are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education, and we're meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We'll begin with a roll call. I'm Gina Hales, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Monica Tuona, Student Board Member.
Emily Harrison, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Thank you. Is there a motion to start the study session?
I move that we start the study session.
Motion made by Board Member Hall. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Boyce. All in favor?
Aye.
We are now in study session. Thank you. So today, first up on the agenda is also me. President Partridge picked a good time to leave. There's lots going on. So Bonnie will put up my presentation here, but the board training is on board norms as well as destructive behaviors, and as you will see, they're kind of mirror images of each other. So let's go ahead and start with the norms, and the norms came from I believe our handbook. Yep, bottom right hand corner is our handbook. So some things that we want to remember are that we need to always be focused on the learning and achievement for all of our students, and I think that we do a pretty good job with that. In meetings, we don't want to dominate time or be combative, and again, I feel like, in fact, with all of these things, I think that right now our board is very functional, which is great, and I think that we have our issues, but I think being combative is not one of them. We want to represent our constituents with dignity and with integrity. We want to have civil discourse and honesty, particularly when we disagree. And I feel like sometimes people think, oh, well, the Provo School Board doesn't disagree, and we do. We disagree. We do it in the meetings, we do it other places, but the thing that I really like is that it's civil, right? And we try to work together. We want to respect, support, and uphold the final decisions, even if you are in the minority, and this can be difficult. When I first came on the board, there was a decision that meant a lot to me and my community, and I was in the minority. And personally, I don't think that this means you can't say, well, I didn't vote for that. I think what it means is, what I usually say to people is, this is not what I voted for, but this is what has happened, and this is how we need to support it, right? I don't think you need to run around pretending like you're really happy with everything, but you do need to say, even though this was not what I voted for, this is how we can now move forward, and I think that's an important piece. We are never to direct staff. That is Devin and Wendy's job, not our job, and we've had conversations about that before. And then we need to attend our scheduled meetings, which just seem to keep multiplying, right? Next, so here are some destructive behaviors that we want to avoid, and this comes from the USDA's Guide to Effective School Boards. We don't want to be disruptive or disrespectful in our conduct, no personal attacks or hostility. We don't want to dominate discussion. So you can see it's kind of like the opposite of what we just talked about with norms. We don't want to ignore meeting etiquette or have a lack of preparation or engagement. I don't think that any of us, there's a lot of things that we have to look at for these meetings, and I've been quite pleased that board members are, for the most part, engaged and prepared. We don't want to micromanage or overstep our boundaries, which I think is a constant thing, right? We're always having to monitor ourselves and make sure we're not doing those things. We want to make sure conflict escalation and unresolved disputes are taken care of in a respectful way. And I have that twice, which is good because there were only 8, and I didn't want it to look unbalanced. And then a lack of respect for roles and responsibilities. So that is it. I don't have anything additional. Anything that anybody wants to add to that? Okay. So thank you to myself for presenting the school board training. And now we will move on to item E, which is the Wasatch Elementary school wall updates. So we have 40 minutes scheduled for this. I just wanted to really quickly remind everybody that at 5:30 we do need to adjourn and head over to congratulate our retirees, and so we're going to try and really stay on schedule today. I know Jennifer's really good at that, so I'm going to try and also be good at that. But we have about 40 minutes for this, and we have some special guests who are going to come and present. Wendy, do you think we need to do any I didn't prepare any, like, do we need to do a summary or anything, or just have them come up?
No, we'll just have them come up. So
All right.
Kyle, who's coming first?
Well, George, you first want to kind of guide the process here?
Yeah, Chris.
So when you're presenting, just come up to the front. The camera's over here, so we usually have you face the camera.
Okay.
And then whenever you come up or when you speak, just introduce yourself and what your role is, your name and what your role is with.
Okay, we have a whole bunch of people here that have been involved with the project, so as the opportunity comes, they can introduce themselves. My name is Chris Hogan. I'm the president of Hogan and Associates Construction, who's the general contractor on the Wasatch Elementary School project. First, thank you for the invitation to come and to share this time with you and this information. We recognize that there's frustration in the community and lots of questions, and so hopefully this information today can help provide understanding and some information that's useful. This is a complex and highly technical issue, and so I took the approach, and we took the approach with this to kind of approach it as talking to somebody that hasn't been involved with the project at all. So, if you've seen this before, I'm sorry, we just kind of started at the beginning. So let's go ahead.
I'm really sorry, I can't see.
Yes.
Where is the,
Oh,
tell me which one to,
Right there, in front of you.
this one?
Yep.
yeah, present, there we go. And, let's see, okay, yeah, go to the next one. So what I thought we'd do is the first thing is kind of run through who are the players involved, and what was kind of the overall time frame of the project, a little bit of the back history, what happened, why did it happen, and where do we go from here? Some different options for you. First, I wanted to say though that and it was timing right in with your presentation on good board meetings. Everybody has been very professional. The difficult questions and difficult situations, but I really appreciate the district and all the team, the way this has been handled, working together and trying to find the answers. Let's go to the next one. Oh, I did want to say too, through all of it, our very top priority is the safety of the students, the staff, the public in and around that area, and making sure that the education continues, not interrupted. So in general, typical construction contract, you have a landowner or somebody who wants to build a project. The first thing usually that happens, and that's what did here, go ahead to the next one, is to hire a geotechnical consultant to go to the site and do a soils investigation, and that was done here, very thorough investigation. The next thing is to hire the design team, the architect, who then hires, and I say hire but contracts with, the civil subconsultant who designs the site, as well as the structural engineer who designs the building, and other subconsultants. And then the soils report and the information from the geotechnical engineer is provided to those subconsultants to base their design upon that information. So that's kind of the relationship there. And then the prime contractor is brought on board. In this case, it's a CMGC. We were brought on early in the project before the design was complete to provide consulting and scheduling and cost analysis and constructability reviews, those types of things. And then once the project is designed, somebody...
For people in the audience who may not know the acronyms, can you explain what CMGC means?
Oh,
Yeah,
very
that
good,
was
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please, if I get into the lingo, just thank you.
Yeah.
So CMGC is a construction manager, general contractor. So typically in that type of a contract, the construction manager comes on, as I mentioned, early in the design process to provide this consulting, and then once the project is bid out to the subcontractors, becomes the general contractor to build the project. So it's kind of a hybrid type contract. Is that helpful?
Would fill both those roles of construction management and the general contractor, and you transition going from design to actual build.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we call it pre-construction services, is before the project bids out and breaks ground, is all of that consulting work You know, cost analysis is really the biggest thing, is cost estimating, constructability analysis, suggesting perhaps alternate systems or materials, you know, especially with the supply chain the way it is, sometimes things aren't available, and so we'll recommend, you know, changes.
Can I ask some questions
Yes,
about the lines?
please do.
So, my understanding of this is that then the architect and you are not contracting with that geotechnical consultant. We're contracting with that consultant, and then they're just providing the information.
That's correct.
So if there is a problem with what the geotechnical consultant is, that's between the owner and that consultant, and you have no role in that.
Right, that's a contract directly with the district,
And who is that
separate from
company?
either. So AGEC is the geotechnical consultant, FFPR is architect, and of course Hogan Construction is the general contractor. As a general contractor, then we contract with the various subcontractors. The civil site subcontractor is Hadco Construction, and their subcontractor was the retaining wall subcontractor that built the retaining walls. You know, of course, there's lots more engineers and lots more subcontractors, but to simplify, that's kind of the orientation here. Is that helpful? Any questions so far? Great. So overall timeline, in August of 2020 is when the geotechnical study commenced. There were 3 borings at various depths, you know, 40 to 60 feet-ish deep, 3 trenches that were dug. It's a very thorough, very detailed technical document that comes from that. You know, dozens and dozens of pages and figures and charts and things. And so that was the standard practice and procedures were followed. Very thorough analysis. The district's due diligence also, besides that, included some other studies, you know, and other due diligence as well, just as is typical on construction projects. In February,
Can I ask a question
go
about
back
that?
to
I
yes.
understand that you're not the geotechnical
Mhm.
engineer, but in terms of the timing of digging those 3 borings in August, from what I've understood speaking to like the Utah U.S. geotechnical engineers and stuff,
Mhm.
that ends the city. That's a time when you can expect groundwater to be low, actually. And so I'm just curious to know, like, was there ever a pushback to say, you know, like, this might not be the time when we would get the information we need?
Yeah, and it depends on the site.
Right, yeah, no,
Because
I know
groundwater
that's true.
fluctuates
Yeah.
year to year and season to season. Actually, it depends on where you are too, but August oftentimes is the highest groundwater because it takes so long to penetrate in and to charge the aquifers.
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
know, John,
I
if you-
did speak with people who do this, and they were just saying, like, maybe that
Mhm.
would not have been the case on that site, but so I was just
Right.
curious, like.
And it depends on the soil too.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is, so the design of the site, not the building, continued, you know, through this time frame, February to August of 22. By the way, as soon as Hogan came on, we went out and dug some additional trenches just for our own use, not part of, you know, the geotechnical study, just to see what was there. But then once the building was located, 2 additional borings were then you know, drilled in April. And then so the next one will show, I think that's the slide, the next slide. Yeah, so this shows the site. The building is the yellow, that's the footprint of the site. The red are the various boreholes, locations of those, and the blue are the trenches that were dug. And the soils report, I didn't put this in here because it gets pretty technical, but gives a profile of every boring and what they found all the way down, and the same with the trenches. It's kind of drawn out.
Can you point out on this where the issue is, where we now know the issue to be?
Yeah, so the very south portion, kind of right here, the parking lot just to the south of the buildings here, and the retaining walls.
So, yeah, but where's
Right
the
there.
water, like, where's it coming from?
Well, that's a good question.
We still don't know?
I don't think people know where it's coming from. We have some ideas, which will, you know, I can share. You know, the contractors aren't geotechnical engineers, civil engineers, hydrologists. So we have our thoughts that I'll share, but they're just ideas. So anyway, that kind of gives you an overview, you know, pretty thorough investigation of all across the whole site, where they were drilled. And this is the longest trench at the bottom here, and it shows, you know, what was there.
So my understanding is you're putting in those, you're digging down to see if there's groundwater, right? You're trying to see if the soil is holding water, right?
Groundwater is part of it.
What else are you looking for there?
And yeah, Tyler, if you I saw you raise your hand.
Thank you.
So maybe say who.
Well, so I'm
Well,
not-
this is a group effort.
You're
Yeah.
good. I'm not with AGC, but I am a geotechnical engineer.
Okay, great.
Typically, the purpose
Except maybe introduce, you know, what's
Oh,
your
yeah,
name
sorry.
and who are you with?
I'm Tyler with IGES, Tyler Lurcher. I'm the retaining wall designer,
Okay.
but I am a geotechnical engineer as well.
Okay.
So yeah, the main purpose of these borings is to just gather subsurface data. So you're looking, yeah, groundwater would be something that you look for, but you're also going to look for certain soil characteristics, because those things are going to affect everything at the site, whether you can place the building on conventional footings or if you need deep foundations, if you can just place roadways, what you can do with your trenches and utilities, things like that. So there's a whole plethora of things that you're looking for with these borings. But yes, groundwater would be one of those things you're trying to check for.
And the optimum moisture content for compaction.
Yes.
You know, the strength of the soils. Yes.
Can you explain to me what the difference between a boring and a trench?
Sure. So boring, they basically take a big drill and drill it straight down in, I think it's 8-inch?
4-inch.
4-inch. Just straight down as far as, you know, they determine they need to, or it won't go anymore. And a trench, they take a big track hoe and just dig a trench, like you put a pipe, a sprinkle pipe or something in. So the borings go really deep, and the trenches are about 13 feet, you know, as far as you can reach. But then the geotechnical engineer can get in the trench and really be detailed in what he's looking for. Sometimes they'll do that for fault studies, you know, to see if there's movement in the ground or what's happened over time, and really the detail of the dirt that's there.
So Chris, can you,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to just interject here, but as much as you can, and maybe Tyler can help, can you explain to everybody why the sites for boring and trenching would have been picked as opposed to doing it somewhere else on the property? Is there a rationale behind that?
Usually you want it where the building is going to go, or structure.
So in
which
April
is-
of 2022, when we
which
knew
is
where
why
the
they
building
came
was
back.
placed, we came back and did additional boring.
Right, and the ones that
If
were
you were
additional
doing the
were
trenches
were
from
3 and
2020,
4.
Why were they placed where they were placed?
Yeah, I don't know how they selected that initially.
Jim Nordquist is here.
I'm with AGEC.
Okay, great.
We've got all the friends.
So glad you're here.
The location is so you can get as much understanding of what is below grade, so that you can help the parties involved understand what they may be getting themselves into. So we just want to get a good picture as best we can of what's underground.
Can I ask you a follow-up question then?
Sure.
Thanks for coming, by the way, we really appreciate it. When you're looking at the soil studies then, and I clearly don't know a lot as I read through the report, but I was trying to parse that, and you encounter like clay soil, how does clay soil interact with groundwater typically?
First of all, clay likes water,
Okay,
okay? And it's so fine-grained that there's a lot of
Mhm.
water in it.
yeah,
And so what typically happens, if there's a source, then it wants to accumulate as much as it can, and it will hold it.
okay.
It doesn't want to get rid of it. And so, yeah,
Okay.
basically it will be moist and will stay moist for a long time.
And that's what I was trying to understand, because I read different things. Does it expand when it holds water, or it just holds it?
Depends on the material.
Okay.
There are some that will expand
Okay.
and some will collapse.
I see. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
That's why they do a lot of testing
Yeah.
to figure out what kind of soil it
What
is.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Other questions here? Did we answer?
Yeah, could we just make sure that we understand that AGEC was our previous one with when we were buying the property and going through placement?
Right.
And then IGES, why they designed the wall were also the geotech during wall construction,
Okay.
correct?
Well,
Yes.
the,
Yeah, I did
the
do- I did
design,
an observation. So,
yeah,
so
the design
basically,
engineer for the
all
wall.
the soil studies, all that
Yeah.
stuff to do with the wall was through
Yeah.
IGES.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
For the wall.
Just clarification.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to start with
Yeah.
kind of who's who, because
Yeah.
it can get complicated. Any other questions here? Let's see. Okay, so the final report, and maybe Jim could talk to this better, but basically the final report was issued in April of 22. The upper portion on the north side was a lot of really granular soils. From the report, it called it alluvial fan deposit. And those are technical words that an engineer understands. The lower southern portion had up to 11 feet of undocumented fill, which means just somebody over time had just put dirt there. You know, it's not any kind of special dirt, it's just undocumented. And underneath that then was this clay sand mixture, and which underneath that then is this lean clay that I think kind of we're all talking about. And the soils report categorized that as a redeposited Lake Monteville sediments. The key point is no groundwater was present in either of those, any of the trenches and borings at either August or April. The big question is that I've heard is why? Why is there no groundwater there? I don't know how to answer that. There just wasn't, right? Lots of steps were taken to try to learn everything that could be learned about the site. I don't know, Jim, if you have any thought into that. They're just
Water goes where it wants to.
yeah.
So I have a question about that. So I have some meeting minutes from a meeting in July of 2022, and it was actually brought up that there was water flowing on the site coming from Oak Lane basically down to Locust Lane. So clearly we knew there was water on this site. So where is that coming from when I've got a diagram here that actually shows how the water's flowing in this? Why are we
talking about surface water or underground?
There was
Yes.
the canal that went, can I?
Yeah, there was a canal,
just
but it also shows that water was flowing from Oakmont Lane down onto Locust Lane. So, and these are this is just a summary of the minutes, but the minutes go into this in quite a bit of detail. This was on July 27th, 2022. So I'm confused about why we would talk about that there's no water, there's no groundwater, when clearly we're addressing this issue that there was water present on this site.
Are they talking about water that was flowing on the roadway
Surface
coming onto the
water.
property? Is that-
Possibly, but then wouldn't that still be something though that we would have to
'Cause I do-
mitigate for?
Yes,
Okay.
so there's a concrete wall at the very top of that hillside
Right.
there, right next to the sidewalk.
Right.
For that reason, because during the design process, that is something that I do recall, is that they've had issues in the past where during large rain events, water does jump the curb and come onto the property. And so there was a concrete wall that was built at the very top of the hillside to at least act as some type of a temporary barrier during those
Yeah,
events.
it goes all the way down Oakmont.
Yeah.
Could there not be water that's draining through that and seeping through? Because as you guys are describing this in these documents, it talks about the seepage is coming through, so it seems that while it's below the building, it seems like it's somehow getting back behind there and seeping through. It's not coming up from the bottom. We don't think that that's groundwater, but it seems like we already knew this was happening, that this was a possibility, right?
That water, as I understand it, I never witnessed that water flowing over the curb. As I understand it, that was only during certain rain events. And so it's not something that, as I understood, was expected to be consistent flow of water.
Yeah, if you go back on the satellite history maps, you can actually see where it's overflowed the curb and washed out.
Okay.
Right up there at the bottom of that road.
Okay.
And you can kind of follow where the water has gone, you know, down, just surface water, down to that canal that used to be there, and then over that.
We got Meg had a question.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Meg.
So I wanted to clarify though with the boreholes, the ones that were done in April on the report 2022 were just on the building site, we weren't looking at the ones that were where the retaining wall is. Because those ones were done in August. And the April ones were ones that were redone on the site to check where the actual building was gonna be.
Yeah, just
correct?
inside that.
So,
Can you go
Yeah,
back to that?
inside the building footprint.
Yeah,
Right.
inside the
but I
footprint.
guess you're still looking for groundwater there,
They're
but
just
that's
looking,
not
they
where.
just wanna get a little better determination of, I think, where the building is going to be built, you know,
Right.
just to make
Right,
sure.
but so I guess it'd be fair to say though, the April looking at those is not gonna be informing what's happening where the retaining wall is. The August studies in 2020 were the ones informing more of the retaining wall area.
And the trenches.
And the trenches, which
Yeah,
were in
You'd have to
August.
answer that.
I mean, we do still look at all those borings relative to where the retaining walls are going to be, of course.
Right.
And during the design process, we look at all pertinent data to where some of those borings are gonna be closer to certain walls, some are closer to others. So we will look at all of those during the design process.
I'm sorry.
These were all,
Wait,
these
Lisa?
were all
Yeah, go
done
ahead.
before any construction
Yeah.
started.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Thank you.
Yeah, so, just as I was looking at it, I'm sure that a lot of this is stuff that we don't understand, and because as I was looking at like the closest well and talking to some of the engineers, they were saying the closest well to this site is by Rock Canyon. It's pumping over 300 feet down at that well site. So as it comes across the base of those mountains, you're several hundred feet below before you get to the aquifer, and groundwater is over 100 feet deep typically along that way, right? And so it raises to me an issue of surface water and like storm drain, like retention, those kinds of issues as much, and runoff and dealing with storm management as it does just groundwater. Does that make sense? Like I feel like I'm not clear, and you're saying there's some things that you can't really see for sure that's happening. Like, what's the water we're trying to make sure we're prepared to deal with? Is it?
So it should be all
Do you
types
see what
of
I'm
water.
saying? Yeah,
Mhm.
but that's just a question I have as I look through this, right? Like, because what I was told was that, you know, April, based on when the aquifers flow and how the wells pull and the public consumes the water, April's too early to really see much groundwater, and August is too late. And they told me typically you would see June and July in this part of Provo is when you would start to, if you were going to find it. But that it is uncommon to see groundwater become an issue like this, right?
Mhm.
So that's why I'm asking, like,
depends
is
on the
there
site.
other water that we're also need to be looking at, make sure we're looking at all sorts of water. And so, anyway, that's just a question, comment, I guess I have around this, but someone correct me, because clearly, I like pretend I'm in third grade and explain it to me. Am I wrong about the groundwater flowing usually more than 100 feet down in a site like this?
I can answer
Yeah,
that a little
thank
bit.
you.
We actually
So
have.
say, John,
Yeah,
introduce
I'm John,
yourself.
Hadfield, owner of Hadfield.
Okay, thank you.
We have a little bit of a unique situation here where, because the wall fell, we've downstacked it.
Yeah,
You can see,
yeah, I was
you
there.
can see the layers of the soil, and you can see where the water's coming in at, and so we actually have it documented where it's filled up to where the groundwater's come up and then pushed out.
Okay.
And so you can kind of see that right now. We actually have those data points done. So this isn't,
Helpful.
when we call groundwater, it's groundwater, but it's not the typical groundwater down in the
Right.
valleys where it comes up.
Uh-huh.
This is where, and Jim or Tyler's probably better equipped to explain this than I am. This is basically where, my understanding is where the snow melt, it saturates the soils, and then the water's moving down through the sandy and the rocky soils. And then it's hitting our clay layer, and then we have now, because we moved so much dirt, we took the sands and flopped them to the other side. That water can move through there easily because it's a sandy, gravelly rock that we placed, and it's moving through there.
And is it your impression, because when I looked at the first kind of sinkhole up on the asphalt, you see the curbing kind of bump up instead of go down? Is it true
No.
that possibly it
Nothing,
heaved
in
the
fact,
ground there at all?
The bottom of the wall never moved.
Right.
Our wall's actually pushed out on an angle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
picture.
can see from the cracks.
The
and
bottom
stuff.
wall.
So we, again, if we had a workmanship issue, we would have seen waves in the wall. We didn't see that. This actually pushed out.
Oh,
and
I'm
then
not
rolled
saying
up.
workmanship. I'm just wondering if the clay soil could have both pushed out but heaved up, because when you look in the parking lot,
It actually
where
goes
the sinkhole
up.
is,
The
the
sinkhole
sinkhole
doesn't
is
go
like
down.
heaved
It actually
up
heaves up.
space.
Does that make sense?
I'm not sure where you're.
Let's see if
The
I can find
sinkhole,
the picture.
Yeah,
isn't the
there-
sinkhole where
I have
the
a
wall
picture.
pushed out and
There's
the
a-
other wall
No,
dropped
no,
down
up on
into
the asphalt above the wall.
In the parking
The
lot.
parking lot.
So
The asphalt actually heaved up.
Yeah, so the asphalt that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that's actually the Yeah, so, this asphalt right there where the curb has, so I'm Tanner with Adco also, I'm project manager there. So the top of this, where this curve is on the corner, that is the finished grade. So it's a little bit sort of, yeah, so this is a better picture right here.
Right.
You can see where the cones are, that is the final grade. There was no change up there. It's just right along that line. You can see it, I mean, you can draw it, you can see it even from this picture. We've just gone down from there. So anything that came up would have been related to just, you know, tilting of, it's not an optical illusion, but it's not indicative of something coming up.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
If you'll go to the next one as well, this is trying to answer what happened. So the perspective of the photo is a little bit, you know, kind of deceiving. The light pole is vertical,
Right.
and so this is the same vertical line. You can see how this bottom wall has leaned out at the top, and by leaning that out, it created space behind for the upper wall that then basically settled as a block. Maybe block's the wrong word because it's all a block wall, but as a mass.
But if it's settled, wouldn't you see cracks going horizontally instead of the bulging we see just vertically on the corner there?
So here was it when it bulged out. That's
Right.
where you see the separations and the cracks.
Right, but
The upper wall basically just dropped.
But that's
And
what I'm
then-
wondering about. It doesn't. If that upper wall dropped, as I look across that wall, I would see some cracks horizontally where that had dropped.
Where it's uneven then.
Where it would be uneven, unless you're saying the entire wall. But I don't. It seems like you would see that. Is that incorrect?
So what you're saying is, you're saying if this really settled, it's probably not going to be the whole wall that collapses, so there should be something that's happening here.
Correct.
So why is that not the case? Why would that occur if it's actually settled?
Can we go to the picture that shows, the retaining walls are a little bit deceptive. The concrete's actually not really holding anything. There's geogrid that goes back into the dirt. So why don't you go back to it actually shows how we built the wall?
Yeah, there's a on that slide. We're jumping around. Let's see, go.
That'll answer that question. The concrete's the facade. The geogrid and built in layers is actually the retaining wall.
Okay.
Right there.
Yeah, that's right. Explains.
So this is IGS's original design for the wall. You can see the lower wall, the upper wall, and all of these. Tyler, this is your design. You got to be describing this.
Yeah. No. Just like John said, these are mechanically stabilized earth walls, MSEs, if you've ever heard that term during this process. And so that's the idea, is that essentially the block is there to just kind of help contain the soil, and the geogrid is connected to it. That geogrid reinforcement reinforces the soil and helps provide strength for that soil to hold up.
The geogrid he's talking about, it's those red lines.
Those red
those
lines.
horizontal lines.
So they're on top of every block core. So
Is that the netting, the black?
yeah, the black
netting?
stuff you see them that they've ripped out a lot
Yep.
of. Yeah.
Yep.
So some of the movement you'll see is that geogrid, when it comes loose, it's what, 14 feet back? Is that?
On some of the walls, yes.
Yeah, and it'll just pull in one piece. So you'll see large chunks moving together because it's tied together. And I think what they're asserting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, that bottom wall became saturated behind it with water, and the hydrostatic pressure then forces the wall to bow outward.
That's right.
And rather than the wall above it falling, the soil behind it settled in to fill that void.
Right.
And the geofabric then pulls with it things that are attached to it back. If you look at the sinkhole, it was 14 feet from the wall.
All of those cracks in the
All that
asphalt are
fabric
right
with it.
at the back of this geogrid.
Yeah.
So really, the front of the wall, it's the dirt behind it that settled.
Into that pocket. at the bottom wall
into
pushed out.
where this
Displaced.
tilted out, then there's room, and that's what settled down.
Before we go on, I forgot that Terry had a question.
No.
Did it get answered?
Okay. Move on.
Okay. Sorry, Terry.
Don't worry
Things are
about
going
it.
fast here.
So I guess if we're going to keep on schedule, we've got what about?
You're okay. You're
10
okay.
minutes?
No,
Okay.
This is
So
really
Chris, you
important.
want to just show them kind of where that water is coming in at that
That would be
lower
great.
wall?
Yeah, so the water is
Yeah.
coming in about this level, and
Coming
Well-
in from where?
just through from wherever it comes from.
It's continually
When this was all dug down, the water's entering from about right here. And then,
I think they need to know that that's all imported fill from the upper side too, right?
Yes,
sure, yeah,
everything back there is.
Right.
this is all the fill from the upper side that was brought down and recompacted.
So before you go on really quickly, I just want to address the time piece, which is, we're supposed to finish in 10 minutes, but this is a very important discussion.
Yeah.
So let's just, we just need to take as long as we need to, and we can either move the other things to business meeting, or we can postpone it to another meeting. So don't worry about it. I mean, obviously we want to be as concise as possible, but
Sure.
this is very important. So go ahead and
Yeah,
continue.
and the goal is good understanding.
Yeah. Right.
We all,
Right.
And we have a question here with Meg.
So just, I think when I was in the meeting with you guys a few weeks ago, you clarified this, and I think it might be good for the public, that the soil and the fill that you used from the other side of the site and put onto this bottom southwest part was really good. Can you speak to the soil too? Why you were able to use that soil?
yeah, so
Right.
the soils report and what we found, you know, you guys, as we dug it up, is really good granular structural soil. It lets the water flow through, you know, just because it's granular, but it's really good soil. So that saves millions and millions of dollars if you don't have to haul all that soil off and then bring in, you know, structural fill, which essentially is the same thing from a gravel pit. You know, saves multiple millions of dollars to do that. So
Lisa?
that's a good decision.
Can you speak to just the typical amount of drainage planned into a wall like this, right? Like where would
That's
the
a-
drains be regularly?
that's a
Just-
Tyler
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. And, you know, maybe I'll come up and just show you.
Thank you.
Might be a little easier, yeah. So in general, we have certain specifications for what kind of material can be placed here. And that's why that preliminary geotechnical report is so important, is based on the data that we're finding there, we can, like Chris said, we can determine, is the on-site fill going to be suitable and meet our specifications for here, or do we need to look at importing certain material? And based on the data, it was suitable for use, and so that's why we moved forward with that. And the purpose of those higher specifications is a couple of things. You want something that's fairly granular. You don't want to have a lot of clay and silt in it, because you do want it to drain somewhat fairly well. You want it to compact really easily. Finer grain soils are really hard to compact. And as well as the strength. You want something that's going to be stronger and interlocked with the geogrid. So that, all of those things combined, that's why we felt comfortable moving forward with the material at the site. As far as drainage initially, the blocks here at the face of the wall, they're hollow in core. I don't know if you guys have been up to the site recently.
Yeah.
Those cores are filled with gravel as the wall is built. That's generally used as the drainage for the site, and that's kind of meant to be more of a safety measure, not something that you want to direct water towards, but it's something there to help provide that drainage source and hydrostatic break.
Is there gravel behind that wall as well, or just what's
There is a little
inside of
bit.
those blocks?
There is a little bit just with the construction process. Obviously, gravel ravels,
Right.
so you'll get a little bit that ravels out of the blocks as you're coming up, but not more than like a foot or two behind the wall.
And we want to talk really quickly about the wall drains that were underneath those wall segments.
Yeah,
So over here, or
No,
the
what we
proposed
have
division?
existing.
Oh, like so we do have a gravel leveling pad at the very bottom here. It's 6 inches thick. That's more so than anything. That's there to help get the blocks level, and it's a material that is self-compacting somewhat. So if you just place that gravel down there, roll over it with a compactor real quick, it's not necessarily going to need to be compaction tested. So that's the idea with that, is you have something that can kind of shift slightly so you can get the blocks perfectly level. There is a drain pipe that's at the very bottom of these walls, and again, that's kind of meant to be more of a safety measure. At the very bottom of these walls, that pipe is daylighted out under the block.
Just one?
Yeah, so there's one at the very bottom of each of the walls, and it runs along the
got it.
entire wall
Yeah,
length,
okay.
yes.
Were those, could you see water coming out of those?
Actually, what we saw, most of the pipes are there kind of just to help provide water a little bit more pathway. What we saw in this case, when we came down here and dug a trench out, a lot of the water had already kind of backed up because of all this material that was in front of the wall, hadn't allowed it to escape. So once they dug that water there, Tanner, you guys were the ones that dug that out. I didn't witness that. It just gushed out, didn't it? Like when you
Yeah,
dug
it came out
it.
below the pipe, so we actually had it to where that bottom-most green pipe was in the air. So
Yeah.
it was only in the air 8 or 12 inches, but the water was drained. The pipe was dry, and the water was draining below it.
Which is what I would expect with it sitting on 6 inches of gravel. Like Jim said, water's going to go where it wants to go, and it's going to want to go into the gravel down below first. So, yes, of course.
So what you're, these kind of safety mechanism drainage
Yes.
options for water that you're speaking
Yes.
to, those are enough to mitigate surface water, is that correct? I mean,
Hopefully, yes. That's the idea, is that, yeah, say that there is something where, like, maybe there's a backed up storm drain or something like that. The hope is that in a temporary event like that, yeah, these do provide enough drainage to
like, let it go
to
through.
kind of let it go without damaging the wall. I think the situation we have is this water, and I've witnessed this myself. I have videos of it. It's still continuously flowing and percolating out of the soil cut, and it's kind of interesting. It must have just been a slightly more granular material that day when the scrapers were bringing the material down, but that layer that it is seeping out of does seem to have a little bit more sand and gravel in it than the layers above and below. So I think probably what's happening is that water's coming in from somewhere, hitting this somewhat less permeable soil and flowing through that sand and gravel right at that point. That's what it seems to be.
Do you, in like your assessment of like trying to solve the problem that we have here, do you look at like surrounding factors, like, okay, yeah, this site we hadn't seen this water, now we see it, what may be going on? There is a development going on next door, and I was recently told that potentially a spring was capped there. That could that be contributing, and is that something that we need to do as a district to look at, like what is happening around the site that maybe is informing this, or is that part of your assessment?
And that's a tough one to foresee, right? But it absolutely does matter.
Or even just maybe you couldn't have foreseen it when you were doing these studies, but now, because I'm hesitant to say it sounds like we still aren't quite sure where this water is coming from. I don't want to put things back up, and then we're like, we still have the source.
To answer your question, yeah, things absolutely can change. I've worked on subdivisions where they've put the first phase in at the bottom of the hill, and then even 5 to 10 years later, they're putting in phases up above, and all of a sudden that starts manifesting water issues down below because you've just disturbed whatever pathway that water was taking. So absolutely, yeah, more development. It's kind of surprising what it can do to other sites around by pushing water around. But
is there a map that shows where springs are in general? Like, this is how much I don't know, but does someone know where the springs are underground in this neighborhood?
Documented springs, I guess.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not very familiar with that.
No. You know what, Jim? Is there documentation?
You typically look at a photograph like this, and if you have some green growing on a hillside, you probably have a supply of water.
It's a good indicator, yeah.
One thing that's interesting about this, you can see all the, if you think about Lake Bonneville when it was, all of these were streams coming down into the lake, right? And that's what brought all of the gravel and everything down. And right here is, we don't know what's around it, but this is all that really gravelly material. It doesn't matter if you build a road across it, put a house on it, that water from up there is still going to get into that and go somewhere.
Sure, but that wasn't news to anyone in the first place, right?
Hey Chris, I think it's worth noting too, so when we dug 65 feet roughly on that corner,
for these walls
right there,
here.
For 9 to 12 to 15 months, we were 65 feet down, and we moved hundreds of thousands of yards, and this site as a whole was really dry. We actually, in the winter, we were able to send extra crews there because they were rained out elsewhere, and this site was drying so much faster that we added people to help the schedule. So, like, by and large, from the earthwork perspective, it was pretty dry for us.
So, let me ask a clarifying question then. But when was that retaining wall built that failed?
Oh, this one down here? It was the fall of 2022, I believe, is when this one was completed.
So we had our first borings going down in 2020. Then you come back in as you're building that wall in 2022 and did additional. Is that just for the building site? That you did not go back in and the digging down on the retaining wall part, correct? Those additional ones were just where the buildings.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's where the difference is.
But
these walls, just to clarify, these walls were finished in February of 23.
Okay.
Oh, so yeah, they started. You're right, correct. They started in the fall. Yeah.
So it puzzles me though, who was at this meeting that happened in July of 2022 where everybody's talking about all this water on the site? If you're saying this site was dry, was that between 2020 and 2022, and now all of a sudden the water's appearing? Like, I'm really trying to figure out.
My understanding of that conversation was the water coming down this street and overflowing, that's where it had eroded down across. And that's where that wall was built right there to catch that.
That's not what this map is showing.
You mean
This
that's
map is
not
showing
what it
that the
is?
water is coming exactly where it's happening. So that's what concerns me a little bit.
Exactly where the wall is
Where
built.
you're saying that seepage is coming through is exactly on that map where it says this water is coming through potentially, and where they specifically stated in those meeting minutes the water was flowing there, and that was July 27th, 2022.
Potentially one of the reasons that was overlooked is that the corner of the wall where that failed is maybe 30 feet above Oakmont Lane,
Okay.
right? When you look, when you go back, there's that shed
Yep.
on the southeast corner.
Okay.
You were looking
Just
off
gas.
a retaining wall,
Okay.
and so potentially one of the reasons, I don't know, I wasn't there at that meeting, but one of the reasons they may have overlooked that or dismissed it, whatever happened, is that we were coming up so much that someone may have said, hey, it's not necessarily a concern because we're going to be so much higher than whatever this condition is, so we don't need to worry about that as much.
We can go back and look at that.
Well, we would have to look.
Meeting and see.
I think we need to get a little bit more, like which meeting that was, because Coretta was here July 2022.
Yeah.
We would have had to, there was a long-standing issue with the irrigation canal.
Yeah, which did
that
go
was
across the whole
constantly
site.
leaking.
Yeah.
It was constantly leaking, Wendy, coming down, and if you look at some of the earlier pictures, you can see the green vegetation, just like Jim is saying, that you can see where that constant leak is. I think it's a little bit further to the north.
Okay.
But
That came,
I
that
know we
canal
had
came
lots of
across here.
conversations about that irrigation water.
That
which
culvert goes
is-
under right
which would be
here.
a little different.
Different, right.
But also, right where you have that arrow started, that is right where the irrigation crossed,
That
right
culvert
here.
comes
And there's
under
still
right
a
here.
culvert right there that supplied water to the Santiago's
Okay.
house, where the new subdivision is.
So is this something where there's a possibility that something has happened with the city's drainage system that we need to contact the city to find out about that's creating this problem?
I spoke to someone at the city, and one question that I had and that we both had on in the conversation was around the storm drain system that's on this site. Can someone tell me kind of what is the storm drain system like on the site currently?
Tanner, would you maybe be able to better speak on that?
Yeah, so all the storm drains, so imagine with me the parking lot, there's that area where we've coned off. All of that, there's a box in each corner, including a box on the corner where the retaining wall failed. Right where that sinkhole happened, there's a storm drain box. The general path of the stormwater on that area of the site is that it comes off the roof and it goes around that parking lot underground and then flows out north and down the drop-off lane to the bottom. There's only it's a single connection all the way through.
And that's an underground pipe.
It's underground, it's 15
So there's
inch.
not like a retention of
Nope.
any kind? Okay, thank you.
Nope, it all drains out.
Okay.
So there is a city storm drain though that does come down Oakmont.
That's what I wondered.
And
And
it's
they
an
put in a
exist-
new- they
yeah,
put in
it's
a
an
new water
existing
line,
storm
too.
drain that is actually up here on Oak Cliff, comes down. It actually comes right where the gas, little gas building is.
Okay.
It comes onto the site right here, and then it angles right below the wall, not below the wall, but right along the kind of the property line, and then it comes out back into 820 South right there.
If there was a
820
leak
north.
in that line, would that be causing this problem? Could it?
It would, but we popped every manhole, looked in there.
We got down, we took pictures down there, we actually
It's pretty clean.
I actually climbed down into some of those
Oh, yeah.
manholes
Oh, I'm sorry.
to take some pictures of that, because we tried to investigate that.
We had the same, trying to find every possible source.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, now is there water, is it getting into those trenches somehow and flowing down outside the pipe? Who knows? Could be.
Is the irrigation
You know,
still flowing?
To answer the one lady's question, you want to plug this in? This shows the picture that you're looking for.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't know.
Oh.
Well, just, I guess we're out.
Where is?
So there's an HDMI cord right there. I don't know if that connects to it.
Can you hit Windows K? Can we?
Just email it. Can you email it to me?
Is the irrigation still closed?
Sorry, what was that?
wendyD@provo.edu.
Not, I don't believe so. I believe they capped it. Is that right, Chris?
What's that?
You capped off the irrigation out here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
what I-
this was, and George, you researched this really deep, but this was the end of that irrigation.
Okay.
And then it was kind of
Yes.
just a ditch extension to get water over
And it was
here.
feeding here, but now that they've changed that development.
Yeah,
Right.
so that
Okay.
irrigation is capped off. It's clear
Great.
on the north side. There actually is a manhole.
Mhm.
You could probably open that and check that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been capped off, and then there actually is a drain that's connected directly to the storm drain for the irrigation company to, at the end of their irrigation season, to drain that line into the storm drain, clear on the north side.
You guys put in, John, you guys put in was it a storm drain extension here in the street underneath? I can't remember what that was, storm drain. So that's what that's tying into.
There's no existing storm drain at all until we put that in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
To Wendy's point, that picture does rebuild one thing, which is ironic, where those green trees are. That's kind of where we stop cutting and start filling. That's kind of the level spot of the site.
Pretty close.
That picture was when the canal was active too, because the sound was taking on.
Yeah, it's like 18 or 19.
So you can see up here, if it's not for the glare, kind of that washout area here, and then where it comes down, and then it's greener here where it kind of washed out the canal there. And then this is where that culvert comes across and over and down. This is where that undocumented fill was all right in there.
You know, there's a ditch there. I mean, somebody was feeding that water there, right?
Into this ditch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the irrigation company it's the end of the line.
That's been capped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both ends. That one that was sitting on the other end of the culvert.
Can I ask another question? How does the water that comes on the roof of the building, where is that being diverted in response to all of this? Like, where does that go?
That's what Tanner was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
The
so-
roof drains would channel it onto the parking lot.
Okay.
And George maybe can speak to which sections of the roof are getting the drainage, but the drainage that goes around that parking lot area is only a small section of the roof. We just take some of the water from the south side. That's why the storm drain is A, only one line, and then B, relatively small.
And to answer your question, there's actually multiple storm drain locations that the water comes off the roof and enters into that storm drain system.
Okay.
Basically on all sides of the building,
All right,
and
I'm gonna
come
stop
down
sharing
somewhere.
and let you go back, let them go back.
So if there's no more questions on this, should we go back to your
Sure.
presentation?
I hope you can get back there.
Sorry, I have to take notes too, so I'm doing it on my
Oh,
phone.
you're doing both.
And going back and forth.
Multitasking.
Sorry, Bonnie. No, it's fine.
Okay, so I think let's see, I guess we're up that way still. Okay, we did that one. Come back down here. All right, let's start with that one. Did we get there? This is just kind of, so we talked about what happened, right, with the leaning of the wall, and that's where we got to. This is what happened immediately after. First thing was to secure the area and keep people out. And then we suspected water was the cause, and so we started looking. We talked about how we potholed at the bottom of the wall. Tyler mentioned that the water came out. Immediately started digging up and basically looking for the source of the water. Also, pretty quickly started downstacking the wall, just for safety and to see what the conditions are. Possible sources of water we thought about at that point, like we've all been talking about. Is it a leak in something? That's usually what you would look for first. It could be in the culinary water, the fire water, irrigation, storm drain. We talked about, is it settlement of the wall backfill? Is there surface water, rain or snow melt? Did some underground spring show up? Or groundwater? Let's go to the next one. So we just started going through all of those. We took tests of the water to see if there was chlorine or anything besides just water. Those were negative. Hadco isolated the fire line and pressure tested it. No leaks there. Provo City, we had look at their supply, and the meter and their system for testing. There's no flow observed when the school is shut down. So we ruled out water line, storm drain. You guys cameraed all ran a camera through all the lines. Didn't find anything abnormal there, no leaks. We talked about the settlement of the wall backfill with, hundreds of compaction tests and the certification report. And probably most importantly, there's no dip in the wall that you could see settlement. Couldn't see any. So we ruled that out. Let's go to the next one. So that just kind of left the surface water and some kind of underground water. I don't know how to prove that. Somebody smarter than me has to do that. So then we started coming up with ideas, and this is where it gets kind of technical. We don't need to dive in too deep, but this is basically the site, the buildings right here. These are those boreholes from the geotech report, the trenches. So if conceptually, if you were to take a big knife and cut along this brown line and then look at the side, look at the dirt, this brown line that's the existing profile of the soil before anything happened. This red line, I don't know if you can see it, is the proposed, or the building levels, the play field, the retaining walls. So you can see a big cut here between the existing surface and the new surface, and a big fill here between the existing and the new, right? So that's kind of orients you there. And so then what we did is we just took the profile of each boring in each trench and laid it underneath, where it goes, to try to get an idea. And this is where the thought comes from. The blue is the really good structural granular material. The pinkish is the kind of the sandy clay mixture, and then the red is the lean clay that Jim was talking about, that holds the water and doesn't let it through. So our uneducated, unengineered theory here is that the water's getting into this granular section, hitting this clay layer and coming down to where then we put the wall. We basically build a dam right there to stop it, and the water's coming in behind the wall. So that's our offer of a potential idea for what's happening. So this is from the engineer's report a couple weeks ago. Based on IGES observations, the distress was caused by excessive amounts of water saturating the fields. We've talked about that a lot. It also adds, there was no evidence of this water prior to and during construction in 2022, nor immediately after construction of the walls in 23. The excess water is a relatively new condition that has arisen from an unforeseen and unknown condition. So that's kind of what happened and why. Then the big question is, what do we do about it?
Can I ask
Yes.
one last question?
Sure.
So, as that water was kind of hitting that gravel layer at the base of the wall, is the reason that it wasn't then continuing away from the wall just due to the fact that we didn't expect it to need to go? So, like, why? That build up, was it just too much too fast? Like, because in theory, right, you have that layer and then the water build, and then it keeps moving away from the wall.
Well, you go back down
make
to that.
sense?
That has the two pictures there.
Yeah.
Keep going. That one right there.
Like, is it just that it was too much
You
too
want to
fast?
talk about
so
that,
it leached out
Tyler?
into the soil?
On the original, and then your proposed new.
So you're just wondering like why that why the
didn't it
drainage
keep
that we
moving?
have didn't have it, why
Didn't
we had
work.
issues with this, yeah.
Yeah, like once it hit that gravel, what kept it from continuing to move away from the wall versus building up and bulging that wall?
Yeah, so really what I think happened is you have your source of water coming in right here, and that's what we've documented. The question is where is that coming from? But that is very well documented. The water's coming in right about this elevation. And it's very obvious that all of these fill soils have been almost completely saturated, and that water's just kind of almost seeped through here, and then we've seen it just kind of drip out the face of the wall. The reason, sorry.
Well, but, I mean, isn't the idea that it hits that gravel and rolls
Yes,
down and moves?
it does, and it did. The problem is you want to do everything you can to keep these soils from getting saturated. The problem is water, as it saturates soil, it gets heavier, and it also kind of decreases the interlocking friction between the soil particles. So it's kind of a twofold attack in terms of hillside stability. You get heavier driving forces and less strength resisting those forces. So that's kind of what you want to avoid. And that's the idea, is that these are just kind of meant as like a temporary measure, not to kind of help provide consistent relief. That's what we're doing now. With the current rebuild, we have a full back blanket drain that's going in. And so the idea is that the water is going to go into that gravel blanket drain and just daylight out below the wall.
And what would keep that from kind of filling up with gravel and soil?
Oh, the gravel and stuff. So we have it, it's kind of hard to tell. There's two faint green lines going all the way up. Basically what they're doing is they've laid against the soil cut a layer of fabric that is designed to kind of help prevent fines. And then on the other side, as they're coming up, they're placing the gravel and placing another layer of fabric on that side. So it'll be double layered with fabric and clean gravel in between. So that's the idea, is that the fix would be to have the water come in here and daylight out below the wall without ever saturating these soils anymore. Yes?
So, going back to what you were talking about earlier, when you showed us that kind of, I don't know, the horizontal.
Oh yes, yeah, the whole plant, the section view of the whole
You're saying
site.
it's coming across the entire, and this is the lowest point of the site. My concern is, if water's going, are we concerned about like settling throughout the rest of the site? Because we're saying water's coming through it, like this concerns me.
It's a very real possibility, and maybe we're jumping a little ahead, but like I certainly, one of my recommendations, regardless of what ends up being finally done, this will get built. But I think going forward, I think it would be wise to go do a few more borings around the site and install monitoring wells to monitor groundwater, because we have evidence that outside of where there's wall movement observed, north of that outside corner, there is evidence that that lower wall is still saturated at the face. So,
to me, and I'm not an engineer, but to me, where the building is, that layer is so far down, there's so much dirt in between, and maybe, geotech, you guys can talk to that more, but to me,
it
that
depends.
doesn't seem like
the
issue was
possible,
more
but
catching the water on the outside corner.
And as I understand it, I could be wrong. I didn't do the observations for the building, but at least based on my understanding, I think the building's pretty close to sitting on native soils, if it isn't all sitting on native soils. And native soils can still settle and collapse, but you're going to have a significantly less chance of that than fill soils.
It's up a little bit.
So can I ask a question, why we didn't just install this to begin with?
The back drain?
Yeah.
Of course. No, and that's a reasonable question. The reason is just
to answer your question.
So yeah, it
here.
looks like you are.
So this is the building level, the first level and the second level, and all of this is down here. The problem is with the fill and the existing, that's where it all comes together, kind of in that lowest spot.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of.
You're thinking that it's coming through the.
That's just
all we have. We have one point source that's well documented that the water is appearing right there at the soil cut. That's what we do know.
This is, like I said, this is just kind of our contractor theory of what might be happening with this clay layer down here, but.
Can anyone tell us what's actually happening? Because this makes me very concerned.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we've been baffled too. We don't know the source of where this water is coming from.
Also, with your
If you
drain
go back
system,
to that.
with your drain system,
even with the fix you just showed us, all
Yeah.
of that water still ends up in the same
Right here.
point, and I don't see an exit strategy that looks different than the one that's currently there.
Yes, if you want to go back to this, so we do
Yeah.
have a pipe. This pipe will be tied directly into the storm drain system.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, so that
So
helps.
this is a perforated pipe.
Okay.
It'll
Yeah.
look just like the pipes that come off of like your roof
Yep.
runoff drains, but it'll have little perforations in it, all the way underneath the block wall. And then at this point, it'll transition to a solid pipe, and then that will be tied into the storm drain system.
And then hoping that that back pipe is kind of collects the water that's trying to come through, collects it, and
Yes.
diverts it back where you're directing the water.
Yes,
where you want
it-
it, as opposed to letting it just go across.
Absolutely, that's the idea. Yep.
Okay, so can you go back to my question about why we didn't install this to begin with?
So yeah, sorry, I got a
No,
little
you're
off
okay,
topic.
sorry.
The idea really just comes down to need, because it's not cheap to necessarily install back drains behind every wall. Now, as an engineer, I would be happy to install that behind every wall, right? But I mean, you're talking, an extra foot of gravel along the whole length of these walls, 20 feet tall. I mean, you're talking several hundred yards of gravel plus fabric materials, installation costs to come in. So that's kind of the whole point of it, is if there is a need, like say that we did know that there was some groundwater seeps or springs or something like that, we could certainly install that and say, hey, this is just absolutely needed. You need to put this in during the design phase. But during this design phase, there was just no evidence of water that was needed to be diverted.
Does
Yes.
anyone know if the option was explained, or said you could do this, but we don't see a need for that, or was it just never suggested?
I don't believe it was suggested, just because I didn't feel like it was needed to even come up. But yeah.
Does the wall being a fill wall play into that?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point too, Tanner. That the other thing that's kind of odd about this is that the wall itself is built up on 10, 15 feet of structural fill. So below this wall, to get to native soils, you're sitting on 10, 15 feet of fill. Plus you're another 18 feet before you hit that layer. So you're 25 feet in the air with fill soils. I haven't been doing this that long. I haven't been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen water infiltrate through fill soils that high up. It's just a little odd.
But if I can interject something.
Yes.
You have to take into consideration this site, there's over 100 feet of fall from the north side down to the south side. And
Yeah.
so at some point in time, what we did essentially was take 50 feet of fill from the north side, place about 50 feet of fill on the south side. So that's the difference between a cut and a fill. We cut from the north, we filled on the south, but at some point in time, there's still those under layers, the clay layers and the gravel and the sandy layers that are still remaining, and it happens
And
quite a
any-
bit sometimes
any development can potentially move the-
I
move
think
the
somebody
water
had
around.
mentioned construction, above or around a certain area can actually change that water flow, and it's hard to predict exactly where all that water is going to go.
But if you're having that kind of a change in height, would you not think that water's gonna flow at some point, because it's gonna go from a higher spot to a lower spot, and that you might need to drain it at some point?
You could always play that what if game, right? But just with no data to support that, that's kind of why there was no discussion about it.
When you're doing the geotechnical studies,
Yeah.
do you look at historical water levels versus the timing of when you're drilling? Because when I look through some of the studies, I've seen that 22 and 23, for example, are the lowest water in over 10 years, right? So when you're looking and you're we don't have water now, but let's look at just what data we have. I know this is far from a lot of the well sites in Utah County where this is right now, but what data do we have around past historical groundwater levels and whether this represents something that's atypical?
Jim, you can talk about.
Sure, yeah, we do look at that information.
Okay.
If it is a situation where that could be an
Okay.
impact.
Okay.
The challenge that you're having and what you're looking at are really deep wells. And yes, the surface or shallow water will somewhat reflect what the deeper water is doing. But again, the fact that everything that we encountered was fairly dry with very little water, Because we can test the soil itself to see if it is near being saturated or not.
Yeah.
Because again, the clay isn't going to dry out when it's underground. And so, you know, those would be indicators or markers if we could, you know, if there was water there or not.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm curious, Tyler, you said you've never seen in 15 years fill material collect water like this.
Yeah.
You also said that the entirety of that wall, both the lower course and the upper course, sit above virgin soil, native soil, on
At the
behind
spot
it.
where we're seeing the issue. At some points as the wall alignments,
So
that does
everything
change.
sitting on everything behind it is fill material.
Yes.
Can you even hazard a guess what about moving that material from the north end of the site to the south end of the site and putting it behind that wall might account for that water capture? And how are we addressing that particular issue in the rebuild so that soil will behave differently relative to the water it encounters? Because I think at a minimum we can say, like you just said, I've never seen fill material behave this way, so we probably need to address not only the drainage with the drain that you just explained, but maybe the way we backfill those walls so we don't put the same soil back in the same way that's going to capture a lot of water.
Yeah, the soil, I don't think there's anything that necessarily needs to change with the soil. If anything, actually our gradations have gotten better. Like, we're actually more granular, the material that's going back in, because as these walls are down stacked, there's no way to easily salvage the gravel outside of the block. So all the gravel that's being put back in is being imported, and that gravel just kind of got mixed in with whatever is here. So if anything, there's more gravel in this fill going in now, just by happenstance of the deconstruction process. As far as changing other things with this soil, I don't think there's anything else that needs to be changed. I mean, short of having a speck of backfilling with clean 1-inch gravel, I mean, which just is not really economically feasible for any site. I think this back drain is a really good solution for whenever you have water issues like that. And so at the very least, this corner where we've had the issue, I do feel really confident that what we're putting in right now is going to solve the issue in that location. I think the conversation then evolves to, we have seen evidence further north of this corner of water.
Can you go down? There's another slide here a little further.
So Tyler, while he's looking at that,
Yeah.
I think
Right here.
another interesting thing to note is at that radius point, can you kind of explain a little bit? I think that is the most susceptible to failure. So by putting this back drain, at least at that radius point, just because of the, I don't know, maybe you can...
Yeah, and that's just a circumstance of the geometry of how the wall is laid out. Just an outside radius is going to be your weakest point on the wall. Just kind of like how an arch and keystone effect can hold bridges up. It's kind of the exact opposite when you have an outside radius. If this was an inside radius and we were retaining this soil, it would act as an archway and kind of push those forces outwards. In this regard, you're actually kind of pushing those forces directly onto that outside radius. So yeah, absolutely, this is a weak point on the wall versus even along this area where it's straighter. But
So if it was a weak point, why didn't we over-engineer that part?
And that's just, it's hard to kind of like account for how weak that is really in terms of design. It's just something where just general geometries make it weak. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily unsafe the way it's designed. It's just, it's a little bit less strong than it would be if it was like a straight wall or something like that.
Would it be beneficial to make it a straight wall then?
I don't think that, well, I don't think it's necessarily needed. There's plenty of walls that I've seen that have performed really well with outside radii over the years. If the wall's constructed, and I believe with this back drain being put in, I don't foresee any of the future issues here. The concerns I have is just, I don't believe that as this green line.
So this is kind of the area that's been downstacked that's having that put in. The question is whether to do along behind the upper wall, to put in more back drain further north and further east.
Yeah.
Or some other
You've only seen that to the green area.
What we've seen is where we've downstacked, it's kind of, I mean, you guys have seen it, it's kind of a wedge down. That layer of soil, and I believe it's still exposed. I haven't been up there today, but I believe it's probably just still a couple of feet above the wall.
Yeah.
You can see that layer of soil that's fully saturated it goes right into the hillside and it just disappears. Like that layer of saturation is certainly continues on further than where we've downstacked. And we've seen evidence. We had Hadco dig a few test holes at the base of the lower wall up here, and we've seen fully saturated and ponded water situations at the base of the wall further up as well.
Tyler, I have a question.
Yes.
Now, as you were talking about the outside radiuses and stuff, there are 2 spots on this very wall that have 2 outside radiuses, am I correct?
Yes.
The one
Yeah.
to the east.
There's another one up there.
Are
Yeah.
we even concerned about weakness in that wall?
I haven't seen any reason to be, no. I haven't gone and looked closely at that other radius. Certainly after this meeting I was planning to go up and take a look at everything, and I can take a closer look, but there's no evidence that I've seen to be concerned about that other one. Like I said, outside radiuses are done very commonly all over the place, and they can perform really well.
So let's, we do have a kind of a hard stop coming up. And so do we have, so I saw on your slides you were getting to what can we do about
the
this?
options, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a good place to just kind of summarize that. So there's basically the put it back the way it was, kind of the minimal, what I call the base option, right? Just build it back the way it was. So that's right here. In addition to that, there's an option to put the back drain in behind that portion. There's another, will you click on that one right here? Just as we were talking with Kyle and Steve, we thought, would it be useful to make this at the top of the wall instead of cobble, just make it concrete. Since it's all gone now, just put it back as concrete. And so that's another option.
How would that help?
To add that into it.
One thing that I don't believe this was necessarily the cause, but certainly something that didn't help is I have evidence that during winter, snow was piled up on this corner right above that outside radius where there aren't any parking stalls. And at the very least, if all of that was concreted, I mean, it's hard to guarantee over the next 10, 20, 50 years of the life of this wall that, you know, people aren't going to pile up snow there again. And I get that it's a very convenient space just considering the geometry of this parking lot. But at the very least, if it's all asphalt or concrete, it's going to be significantly more likely that that water goes into the storm drain system rather than saturating into the soils behind the wall like it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one option.
Yeah.
That cost, if I remember, is like $25,000. Just seems like an easy thing. Let's see, where were we?
Up there.
Right here. This orange, Tanner, that's kind of your best estimate of what asphalt's going to need to be replaced, and obviously since all this came down, all of that has to be put back in the end. So that's all in that base price. And then there's a couple of options. One would be to continue destacking and basically replace all the wall, back that further distance. That's quite expensive. So the other option is to dig a back drain trench behind those walls, and so we have an option for that as well.
Can I ask a question about the rebuilding of the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Did the actual, no, I don't even know what to call bricks. They're
Yeah,
not
the blocks.
Did
Yeah.
the actual blocks crack?
Some of them.
Some did, yes.
So we're
Some
gonna have to
did.
replace. We're
We're up to about 50 blocks total, which is a small percentage of the total blocks that we've unstacked.
Yeah.
So 50 individual blocks have been replaced.
Okay, and the other ones, I'm assuming that means the ones that are okay haven't been, the integrity hasn't been compromised. I don't know if that's even.
Yeah, and we specifically asked the block manufacturer if he had any concerns reusing them. He says no, absolutely not.
So 50 of them will need to be replaced. The rest can stay the same.
So far, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Hmm?
And with what's that, is it
GeoGrid.
Grid?
Mm-hmm.
Would you stay with the same 14 feet, or would
No.
you go up to 20 feet?
No, if you go back up to this image, I can show you guys what our
Yeah,
current plan
thank
is.
you.
Just because in the grand scheme of things, GeoGrid is fairly cheap,
Right.
considering everything else.
wondering.
So these are the minimum lengths, and I have another drawing that kind of goes hand in hand. This is just a generic section view that actually spelled out the lengths. What we're doing with this section is I did provide a minimum length, but also to extend it all the way to the gravel cut. So basically everything that was excavated out is going to be fully reinforced going back. There's not going to be this space like there was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And will it include gravel fill behind the wall?
Yes,
as
this
well
this
as
is what's
in the wall?
Yeah,
with
so
these
yeah, there will be
drains?
gravel inside the blocks and then as well at the very back. Yep.
Oh, but not behind the wall.
Not directly behind the blocks. No. No.
Okay.
So with the new design, will the drains that were under the wall still be there, or will that be?
Yes. So they as far as the last time I was out there, they teed the bottom one in. Obviously they haven't gotten to this one yet, but yeah, they've teed this one, and you only see one singular pipe here. I have a good photo of this construction. I was out here a couple of times in a row, multiple days. They actually have three layers of pipe coming down, all connecting at one point at the lowest point of the wall. So we went all the way to the extent of the down stacking, put pipes there, and then one in the middle, and then they even graded the subgrade so that it would even flow towards this lowest point. So everything is directed to this point now very well, actually. Yeah, and gravel. Yeah,
And gravel. So
yeah. So yeah, this is fully gravelled below too. There's at least a foot of gravel with fabric on top of that gravel at the very bottom. So yeah, that's the idea: is that any water hit this gravel, percolate down, and get down below the wall.
Go out.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go. Where are we? Let's go to this one.
Slide 30.
Yeah.
So as far as options and costs, and I believe we sent you guys the cost for this. Hopefully you got it. What I called the base cost is this $457,000, just to put it back the way it was. Come down to this next one if you would, right here. So the new back wall, the green line on that map is about $55,000. The landscape rock at the top replaced with concrete is $24,000. Then to dig the trenches, the additional trenches we're talking about, the cost of that's $136,000. To remove and replace the blue walls is an additional $781,000. And then we haven't talked about this. We're just trying to be creative, but you could drill horizontally back in and put these wick drains in. I don't know how effective that really is. This would be a much better way to do it. But just to have the option. So then the next one adds up, some of the combinations, basically.
What's your recommendation?
So our recommendation is this one with the additional. So put everything back with the new back drain, do the paving on top, and then dig the trenches back behind the other walls. So that's the one we recommend, but we know, you have lots of other pressures and decisions and factors. So.
And so that option 3, when you say additional back drain trenches, that's going in front of the building a little bit. Is that correct or no?
Basically, that's going to be heading north and east. So they've only downstacked to a certain point.
Yeah.
And like how I said, that the saturated soil layer just kind of goes
so
right
you
in.
would extend to that where you
We would, they're trenched down to that layer further back.
Which would mean digging up the front of the lower part of where
You want to,
right?
you want to talk about how that would impact the front of the building potentially, the trench.
Yeah, that's what it gets longer. So.
Yeah, cool.
That certainly would go into that roadway, that drop-off lane that's there. Certainly that would get ripped up during that process.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of asking and knowing that would be, but if it's necessary.
It'll get ripped up during the process, but put back afterwards.
Put back, yeah.
And how long does this process take?
Probably.
How long did you say?
Up to 3 weeks.
Okay.
For the wall part.
I don't have a machine that goes that deep. And so we have to bring in a special machine, or we're going to have to dig down and then tear it because I think we're 36 feet deep.
Yeah.
Why do you suggest that one and not the one that's more expensive that's building the additional wall? Because now I'm getting concerned as you're talking, well, we can't guarantee that there aren't going to be other sources of water. What happens if there are other sources of water? Then am I ripping this out again in another few months and starting over with option number 4? Because that's something I can't go back to the taxpayers and ask for if they're like, why didn't you think about this and mitigate it from the beginning?
And we haven't had a super wet year. So
Right,
I just
we
want
have
the
not
record
yet.
to show there's no unforeseen amount of water this year that makes this unusual.
Yeah, that's true. So why would you pick option 3 rather than option 4 if, 'cause you did kind of create some doubt in my mind that option 3 it's just gonna solve this problem right now, but if we find more sources of water, we could be in a bigger situation, correct? Could be more problematic.
Chris,
one of the things that option 3 presents to you is it's simply the option to save the difference between 1.3 million and 675,000. If we get clear onto the north end where our blue line stops and it's super wet still and we feel concerned, then we can have a different conversation versus if you say today, hey, go with option 4, you can do the whole thing, and we get through it and we downstack it and maybe you didn't need to go that far.
Okay.
At that point we're in it.
Okay.
And there's no option to save the difference between the two.
Okay.
You're just going to spend your 1.3 million. And so it's a little bit of a tiered approach is the way that I kind of envisioned it, but certainly your concern's valid.
Okay. So we can go, sorry Lisa, so we can go this part and then if you get into it, then you could come back with a recommendation if we need to go farther. Okay.
Yeah, we're all watching very closely.
Yeah. Lisa, did you have?
Sorry, my last question.
I think that's probably most
so
of what we had.
Because I lived back east where we had a lot of various water issues all of the time. We were always putting in French drains and systems into our homeland as well as our schools and things. And we really did over time find that even with that like geotextile fabric, things filled up eventually, right? Just debris and things would get in there. Is there a way to put some kind of a port or something like what is our plan for if at some point over time, because we want this to last as long as the school lasts, right? But we know that even with that fabric, eventually sediment comes through and builds up a bit.
Yeah.
So is there a port or is there a drain? Is there some access to those where we clean them out or we check them periodically so that, we don't end up with this same problem even with these things in place?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one for that gravel back drain. Certainly the pipes down below the wall, you'd be able to have access and you could probably snake those if you needed to. The back drain against the soil cut,
right.
Really the idea to keep that permanent is by fabric wrapping both sides.
Right.
Just because in general, we've done blanket drains where we don't have a fabric on the fill side because the fill material we're putting in typically doesn't have a lot of fines in it. So there's not going to be a lot of fines migration. There still can be some, so that's the idea of having that fabric on both sides. It's a pain to build. I'm sure your guys complain about that a lot. Every time I've done that before, everyone complains about how big of a pain it is to fabric both sides. But that's the idea, is that doing everything we can to make sure that that fabric's not going to allow any fines from either side going in there.
And it's not just landscape fabric.
Yeah. Oh yes. No. This isn't like this is not
geotextile.
weed barrier.
Yeah.
This is an engineered product
Yeah.
that's specifically meant for this purpose.
And I can help allay your concerns. I'm also from back east, and we do French drains as well. And the soil there is so much clay, and so it's really kind of a different animal than the soil that's going to be right up against this fabric.
Thank you.
Let's go Meg and then Melanie.
I appreciate all of this and
thank you.
all you guys being here. I think as we're talking and we're figuring out what we're going to do moving forward, I am concerned that we still don't know the source. And I think what's hard in this areas in the neighborhoods around this site, I keep getting people, and it's anecdotal, right, but they have had concerns about water consistently. And I think back to what Wendy was speaking to, that we've talked about water, and I guess I'm just concerned about not having some foresight about water being a potential problem on the site, regardless of what we found. And I know that this is just anecdotal, but plenty of people have come to me saying, we have these water problems, we've had these, or we have this current water problem, we've had them in the past, or these are the areas around the site that have springs or water. And I guess I'm not really asking a question, I just want to voice that that's a hesitation of mine of.
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about back here. It seems like we're treating the symptoms, not the injury. What's our plan to find this water? All we're going to do is keep going along. I just don't know when's it going to end.
Yeah. But what I think would be a good idea, and it kind of goes in hand a little bit with this option 5. So I think it would be important to go do a few more borings around the site. And with that, with doing borings, you could go test periodically to see if there's water in these wells that we put in. So just very similar to the borings that AGC already put in. We would just put in a pipe with filter sand to prevent fines from getting in, but would allow water in. And really what that would tell us is that we can go back at any point in time and go measure to see if there's water there. Plus, at the same time, doing the borings would also allow us to see if there's water at a certain depth as well. So relatively speaking, compared to tearing down a wall, doing a boring like that would be a cheap option to at least go see what else is out there around the site. Yeah.
So we're talking about a significant amount of money here that we weren't expecting to have to pay. I feel it might be good if we brought in an outside consultant, possibly to just do an evaluation of this too. I don't know if that would be possible.
I would also feel more comfortable just having a third party look through all of the studies, the plans, where we are now, like gathering is going over contracts and things before. I'm still not sure that we aren't just repairing before we know how we're going to continue potentially to experience the injury itself, right? And so
I just feel like we're band-aiding.
This isn't our expertise, as obvious from the questions I'm asking, but you know, for me, I would feel better. I think just having someone else come in and just look through everything.
Devin and I have already talked about that.
Okay.
Speaking of, just it brought it to mind. So the original design did have a third-party review. As well as I understand, you're having a third-party look at this second one too already.
Because
so
this is taxpayer money, right? And we have
that's typical.
ownership.
Every design basically has a third-party peer review.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a lot of information.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yes.
We have some things that we're going to have to discuss and figure out.
Yeah. I just want to say too, as we end, that this whole team, as we've talked, we're committed to this project and to the school and the success. So we're not going anywhere.
Yes.
We'll just keep working with you as we figure it out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Actually, there's probably one question. The reason originally when we noticed the wall we were gonna bore it was $40,000 to have them come in and bore and monitor. But we said, hey, we have to downstack the wall anyways to fix it. Let's not pay for borings along there to tell us what we're gonna find out when we cut the face open.
Plus they were a month out and we'd have it down before they got here.
And we wanted to make sure that there was no safety issues. And so I guess my question today though is, we have started in good faith, and I built the wall up to the first level. I back up because I wanted to trying to beat the news and all these things that you guys are fighting. But we're back up to the top level. We really do need a little bit of direction right now because I'm kind of at that hinge point of what we do.
Are you to a point where any of these options are doable without more downstacking or more work going forward from where you're at right now?
Yeah, I can continue to go up, but the problem I can't do is I can't extend the drain. Okay. Because I don't have a way to do that.
And you are at that point right now?
I think I'm within 1 to 2 days of that being at that point. And we did that when we met with you guys first time, saying we kind of had, I thought, hey, let's get this down, let's find out what we have, let's get built back up so that we don't create any more problems. And so that's kind of where we're at. And like I said, it's went fairly well. The drains, the gravel, everything's in. The guys have been working. And so I think things are coming together right now. The real question is do we keep going? Like I said, I don't think we need to go east that far because we're on a fill. I mean, if you look down off the edge, we're 20 feet above the natural road. However, going around to the north is a little bit questionable. And that's where, as we were digging, we we're going to just see what the water looked like as we dug and were able to look.
I just want to explain to you kind of what we're up against as these individuals are representing taxpayers. So I understand that desire that we've got to make a decision pretty quickly, but I also know that we basically built a school on a canal because that's what we did. And we're talking about there's no water issues, but we built it on a canal, and there are a lot of people questioning why we picked this site, and I don't want to go back 5 years and address that. But we have to demonstrate that we are asking all of the right questions and doing right, because if we come back in 2 months and we now have to take it down again and do something more, these individuals who have to be responsible to the taxpayers are not going to be able to look at them and say, I did this in due diligence. When people are putting pressure on us to make a decision within 24 hours or 48 hours, and you're telling me there's no danger to the school at all, that's what I'm hearing, then I want to keep school going, but I want us to explore some things as well. And I understand that you guys are doing this in good faith, but they also have to do this in good faith to the taxpayers. That's very important. And that's just one of the obstacles of dealing with a public entity. It's not a private entity. It doesn't work that way. And this takes a lot of time, and they are getting constant text messages and emails and questions and being grilled by the public. I don't know if you watched Provo Forward or KSL last night or all of the different things that are coming at us. That isn't you that deals with all of that. That's my team that deals with all of that. And so I'm just asking for a little bit of time so that they can make the right decision, and putting pressure on them, I think, creates a little bit of an issue when we're thinking about what's going to be in the best interest for our entire community. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Well said.
So we will get back to you. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not the president. I can be upset. We will figure some things out, and someone will get back to you.
So we'll finish this top wall and bottom wall, and then we'll stop.
That's fine.
And we'll pull the truth out.
Right.
Wait, but I have a question. That bottom wall won't have to be redone with any of these potential mitigating decisions?
We built the bottom wall with the gravel and the layer.
I see, okay, so
We've done that.
so
We haven't.
I just don't want you doing work that you have to redo.
We did the grains and everything, because that was my argument, like, hey guys, I don't want to do this again.
Right, that's what I was just,
And
because
so-
we really do appreciate what you're doing. We just, personally, I don't feel like we have the answers yet. We don't have enough data for me to feel like we're going to make the best choice yet. I feel like we have to have more information. So.
I think we're good there. Like I said, we're trying to accommodate, and like I said, let us finish the top wall so we get things sealed off and safe, and then, or the bottom wall. And then I think we'll go ahead and tell them to hold until you guys are ready to make a decision on the top, if that's okay.
I don't envy your position. But it sure gives me a new respect for our board members. School districts.
If it makes you feel better about what's being reconstructed right now, if there was groundwater evidence during the pre-design phase and everything like that, this is the solution I would have implemented during construction initially. If that helps you feel better.
It does, thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Okay.
The battery.
Yeah, what went in, well, at least in this spot, yeah, if there's more groundwater.
All right, thank you. We need to move. Is there a motion to adjourn the study session?
I move that we adjourn the study session.
Thank you. We'll go over to the retire reception, and then we'll begin as close to 6 o'clock as we can with the PCSD. PDC. Okay.
Is there a need for us at the other?